James left me a message. Living with Diana now. Don't bother asking for money. I've made sure there's nothing left to split. I stared at my phone, holding my coffee steady. Sunlight streamed into the kitchen, lighting up the same countertop where we'd had breakfast just yesterday. 15 years of marriage, and this was how he ended it, with a text. I sighed and typed back, "Thanks for letting me know." I added a thumbs up emoji for good measure. His response came immediately. "That's it? No crying? No begging. Diana was right, you really are cold." I set my phone down. Diana, his 28-year-old assistant, had been in his life for only 8 months. She had no idea what she was getting into. I almost felt bad for her. Almost. I opened my laptop and pulled up an old email from Marcus, our accountant. 3 months ago, he'd warned me about strange activity in our company's finances. I had told him to investigate. Now I was glad I did. I dialed Marcus. He picked up on the second ring. "Olivia, I was just about to call you. The audit report came in this morning." I smiled. Perfect timing. James just told me he's moved in with Diana, and there's nothing left to split. Marcus sighed. He actually put that in writing. With an emoji, I confirmed. "Let's move forward with everything we discussed." "Are you sure? Once we report this." He made his choice, Marcus. Now he'll face the consequences. Just then, my phone buzzed again. Another text from James. "I'll send someone to pack up your things. Diana wants to redecorate." I chuckled, thinking about the financial evidence Marcus had been gathering. Hidden money, fake accounts, offshore transfers. James thought he was clever, but he forgot one thing. I helped build our company. I knew everything. The doorbell rang. I checked the security camera. Diana stood there, clutching her designer handbag. Bold move. I opened the door with a polite smile. "Diana? What a surprise." She hesitated, then said, "James asked me to measure for new curtains. He said you'd be moving out soon." I stepped aside. "Go ahead. But maybe wait until after the audit." She froze. "The audit?" I feigned surprise. "Oh, James didn't tell you. The IRS is very interested in some recent transactions." Her face paled. I should check with James first." "Probably a good idea," I said lightly. "Oh, and ask him about the Peterson account. Just something to think about." Diana practically ran to her car. I watched her speed off, knowing exactly what would happen next. She called James in a panic. He'd reassure her, blame me, tell her not to worry. But then she'd look up the Peterson account. She'd see how its CEO went to prison for fraud. She'd realize James had copied the same tricks. A new text from James appeared. "What did you say to Diana?" I snapped a picture of the audit report and sent it. 3 dots appeared as he typed. Then they disappeared. Then they came back. "Finally, we need to talk." "Yes," I replied. "Bring your lawyer." I set my phone down and looked out the window. James had always loved this house. Loved the way it made him look successful. But he'd underestimated me. That was about to change. Bennett and Associates took up the entire 15th floor of a sleek downtown building. I sat in a conference room, watching James shift uncomfortably in his expensive suit. Across the table, his lawyer, Gregory, flipped through the audit report, his expression growing more tense by the second. "This is ridiculous," James snapped. "You're trying to destroy everything I built." "Everything we built," I corrected, keeping my voice calm. "Or did you forget who handled the clients while you were busy impressing Diana?" Marcus, our longtime accountant, sat beside me, papers neatly spread out in front of him. James was only now realizing just how much Marcus knew. "Mrs. Parker," Gregory began carefully, "surely we can discuss this. My client is willing to." "Your client," I interrupted, "has been moving money into secret accounts for months. He stole client funds, faked reports, and committed tax fraud." Should I go on? James's face turned red. "You can't prove that." Marcus slid a USB drive across the table. "Actually, we can. Every shady transaction, every fake document, it's all here. Including the offshore account he opened in Diana's name last month." Diana, who had come along expecting to support James, suddenly looked confused. "What offshore account?" she asked. James waved a hand. "It's nothing, baby. Just business." I let out a quiet laugh. Oh, you mean transferring $2.3 million into an account under your girlfriend's name? That business? Diana's face paled. James, what is she talking about? Don't let her manipulate you, James said, but I could see the fear in his eyes. He knew we had him cornered. Sarah, my lawyer, finally spoke. Mr. Parker, the IRS has already been notified. They're very interested in your creative bookkeeping. James's eyes met mine. You wouldn't. They'll go down too. The firm will be ruined. No, James, I said. I've already given full proof of my cooperation. The board is ready to move forward. You're the only one going down. Diana suddenly stood up. I need some air. She grabbed her purse and rushed out. Diana, wait. James called after her, but she didn't stop. He turned back to me, his face twisted with anger. Happy now? You've ruined everything. No, James, you did that yourself. Gregory leaned over and whispered something to James. His shoulders slumped. He had lost. What do you want? James finally asked. Sarah slid a document across the table. Full disclosure of all assets. Immediate resignation from the firm. A clean divorce with fair division of legal assets. Sign this, and we might keep you out of prison. James stared at the paper, his hands shaking. And if I don't? Then we report everything to the IRS and FBI, Marcus said simply. Silence filled the room. James picked up the pen, hesitated, then signed. His usual confident signature now shaky. You'll need to leave the house immediately, Sarah added. Your company access ends today. James stood up, trying to fix his jacket like he still had control. You think you've won. You're nothing without me. I stayed seated. That's where you're wrong, James. I built this company too. The difference is, I did it honestly. He stormed out. Through the glass walls, I saw Diana waiting by the elevators. She didn't even look at him. Instead, she kept pressing the down button, eager to get away. I gathered my things, the weight of the morning settling in. Marcus gave my arm a reassuring squeeze. You did the right thing, Olivia. I nodded, watching as James and Diana left in separate elevators. I know, I just wish he'd made better choices. As I stepped out of the conference room, I lifted my head high. The worst was over. Now it was time to rebuild my firm, my life, and my future. But this time, on my own terms. 6 months after the meeting that changed everything, I stood in my office overlooking the city skyline. The firm had not only survived James' departure but was thriving. Our clients had appreciated my transparency during the transition, and most had chosen to stay. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Just heard from Gregory. James took the plea deal. 3 years, minimum security, plus full restitution. I set my phone down, letting the news sink in. It wasn't satisfaction I felt, but rather a sense of closure. The man I'd married, the one I'd built a life with, had chosen his path. Now he was facing the consequences. Diana, as it turned out, had been smarter than anyone gave her credit for. Once she understood her name had been used in James's schemes, she cooperated fully with the investigation. Last I heard, she'd moved back to her hometown and was working for a small accounting firm, legitimately this time. A knock at my door pulled me from my thoughts. Sarah Bennett stood there, holding a manila envelope. It's done, she said, placing the envelope on my desk. The divorce is final. The house and your share of the firm are secure. I picked up the envelope but didn't open it. Have you heard from him? Sarah shook her head. Not since he accepted the plea deal. His lawyer says he's different now. Quieter. I thought about the James I'd known, confident, charming, and utterly convinced of his own cleverness. Prison would be a harsh awakening. The board meeting went well, I said, changing the subject. We're expanding the compliance department, implementing new oversight procedures. Learning from experience, Sarah smiled. Making sure it never happens again. I corrected. That evening I walked through my house, my home, seeing it with new eyes. The spaces James and I had shared were slowly becoming mine alone. I'd redecorated the living room, planted a garden in the backyard, turned his study into a library. Each change felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. My doorbell rang, and I opened it to find Marcus holding a bottle of wine. Thought you could use this, he said, stepping inside. Just got word that the last of the restitution payments has been processed. All affected clients have been made whole. I led him to the kitchen, pulling out 2 glasses. That's worth celebrating. As we sat on my back patio, watching the sunset, Marcus cleared his throat. You know, when I first noticed the discrepancies in the accounts, I was afraid to tell you. Thought it might break you. I smiled, sipping my wine. The old me might have broken, but I'm not that person anymore. No, he agreed, you're stronger. A text lit up my phone from James's sister, Emma. She'd stood by me through everything, choosing truth over family loyalty. Just checked on the house, she wrote. He's doing okay. Keach is accounting to other inmates now. Says he's sorry. I didn't respond. His apology, while probably sincere, came too late. The time for sorry had passed. What's next for you? Marcus asked, noticing my distraction. I looked out at my garden, where new flowers were starting to bloom. Growth. The firm is expanding. I'm mentoring young accountants, teaching them to spot the red flags I missed. Something good should come from all this. And personally, I thought about the art classes I'd started taking, the travel plans I was making, the life I was building on my own terms. I'm learning to trust again, I said finally, not others, myself. As if on cue, my phone buzzed with another message. This one was from an unknown number. I'm sorry. For everything. Jay. I deleted it without responding. The time for his words had passed. Now was the time for my actions. Marcus raised his glass. To new beginnings? To wisdom, I corrected, clinking my glass against his. And to knowing your own worth. Later that night, after Marcus left, I sat in my library. The room that once housed James's schemes and secrets. On the wall hung a new piece of art, a painting I created in my classes. It wasn't perfect, but it was authentically mine. I picked up the manila envelope Sarah had brought earlier, finally ready to look at the divorce papers. As I read through them, I felt no sadness, no regret. Instead, I felt peace. James had thought he was writing the end of our story when he sent that text 6 months ago. Instead, he'd only written the end of his chapter. My story was just beginning. Standing at my window, watching the city lights twinkle in the distance, I smiled. The audit report that had changed everything now sat in a drawer. A reminder that sometimes the greatest acts of love are the ones we do for ourselves. Like choosing truth over comfort, strength over silence, and growth over stagnation. Tomorrow, I would wake up and continue building the life I deserved. And this time, I would do it on my own terms.